losing side was enforced, that there was no jobs, no sewer, no water, no electricity, and no hope. Now that's better now, but it's actually a rundown part of town south of the elegant French Central and the official center of city. So you may have been there before, the Caravel or the Rex Hotel, the Continental Hotel. Those are the big and very stylish hotels of the center of town. Especially the Caravel and the Rex have rooftop restaurants that are in the evening time are very busy. And the Rex Hotel is where they used to have the briefings by the U.S. military that called the 5 o'clock follies. Then you have the large Benton market here, and numerous restaurants, walking areas. It's a good town to walk around in, though the traffic can be quite tremendous. And I recommend going to the Museum of Fine Arts. I know there's an art gallery tour that'll go there, but there's a lot of activity right downtown, and it is a much more, I'd say, manageable city than Bangkok. Here's the port where we will be tied along. Now they have a lot of parks along the side. It's not quite as crowded as some of the traditional markets that are in the side creeks of Saigon. But you'll see that, like Bangkok, it is mushroomed with prosperity, people coming in, investing. There's a lot of Japanese, Chinese, Europeans, lots of people have come. This is the main market, the Benton Market, which is right near one of the central squares. This is a statue of Tran Hung Dao, who was the commander of the Vietnamese forces that defeated the Mongols under Kublai Khan in 1284. So he's one of the national heroes that you'll see around town that are not Ho Chi Minh. But this is a view of the former presidential palace, now called the Reunification Hall, which has a display of the war for independence, as they'll call it. Here's the Cathedral Notre Dame. And that's nearby there is also the Central Post Office. This building was actually designed by Gustave Eiffel, who designed the Eiffel Tower. Then you have the City Hall, which is a bit of a wedding cake of the Second Empire style, but Uncle Ho is keeping a watch on the front of it. And note he's in a position as he's writing poetry. Like Mao Zedong, he was a literary leader and often wrote poetry to praise his own efforts. Here again is the Presidential Palace, and now the Reunification Hall. Here's the Continental Hotel, and right across the street from that is the Caravel Hotel on what's called Constitution Square, and the old Vietnamese Parliament House is right on that square. Here again, the Cathedral Notre Dame, which is not all that distinguished as a building. It's just surprising to see such a French cathedral right in the middle of an Asian city. And as you can see, it's getting surrounded and belittled by all of the condominiums and office towers that are surrounding Madame de Notre Dame. There's another area of Saigon called Cholon, which is the Chinese district. And without the Chinese merchant class, there would not have been a big city in Saigon. These were mostly Chinese who came down from South China as merchants, and they had their clan houses and their temples and have stayed ethnically different from the Vietnamese, even though they're forced to speak Vietnamese and work there. But Chinatown of Saigon was also suppressed by the communist leadership as being much too commercial, corrupt, and undercutting the prices of the government merchants. But it's very lively and has a lot of temples and small markets within that area. Here's one of the numerous Buddhist temples in Saigon. This one, the Sha Lo, is up on the outside of downtown, but it is a copy of one that's in Hue up north. But it has an unfortunate history. This is where President No's police came and attacked the pagoda when the Buddhists were protesting. So they took the monks up from the top, threw them off the roof. Now this is at District 4 I mentioned. On the south side of the city, there are many people that are still poor and have very limited housing capabilities. One of the problems with the reform and opening of the economy, like other places, in Vietnamese they call it do moi, the reform effort. What it has done is driven up the prices of many things and then left those without education or without good employment to be poorer than ever. And you can see them around Vietnam. Some have cars, some are still working on the street. So like many other Asian capital especially, you have a social contrast is right there, visible in front of you. But most of the impression when you get to Saigon is this great roar of motorcycles. It must have been much nicer when there were all rickshaws and bicycles, but now there's 1 million or more motorcycles in town, and they roar around the town, and it's quite tricky to get across the street in places. And then a lot of the housing is sort of very dilapidated if it hasn't been replaced, and the electrical lines are outside on the street, so it's pretty unfit for human habitation in some parts, matched by some of the grander boulevards and the busyness of the people. Somebody on the ship told me they were in Saigon last and they wanted to cross one of the main streets, but the traffic was so thick they got a taxi that took them all the way around the block and dropped them across the street because they didn't dare walk out in the middle of it. But the standard technique is just to step out and keep walking, because there's this curious ability, especially in Vietnam, where everybody flows around each other and nobody seems to get run over. But it's a very lively place. But I warn you not to change money or go with street hawkers, because I myself was fleeced once there. Most people are fine. Most of the shopping is okay. But there's a lot of life in the city. Notice this is the only, let's say, fat Vietnamese I've seen in a while. But you can see, here's a remnant of the American era, an old Buick that is used only for festive occasions. And now you can even find outside of Saigon they're making golf courses and resorts and spas. So this whole society's turned into something that is welcoming, particularly to foreign visitors, and has created a whole consumerist, commercial, and a whole new generation's modern life, which is quite different than any of the history that we know. So you can imagine the generational difference. So this gentleman may have come from a village where they had never seen an automobile, except maybe a French official driving by, and then went through all the trauma of the war, and then the new generation often doesn't understand. And a lot of the older generation are still somewhat scarred from the terrible times, and even the old Viet Cong cadre organized a group in Saigon to protest the Hanoi policies that were not giving them the right pension or credit for their efforts, and some of them were sent off to the re-education camps. There was a man named Nguyen Chi Thien who criticized the new Hanoi leadership of Saigon, and in 1980 he slipped a poem through the door of the British embassy, and he was decrying what he called the Red Lords of Hanoi, who have stored all my dreams away in jail. And the poem goes as, "Flowers from hell. More than 10 years I've lived in jail, the very heart of their regime. And if Uncle Ho and the party, let's suppose, allowed free movements in and out, Grandfather Marx's paradise would soon become the wilds where monkeys roam. On Uncle Ho's own soil, life is sadder than a tomb, and the party holds you down and you lie still. And when we are all equal, scholars, dunces, beasts, and the veterans, the paramount hair-graying question is, 2 meals, will we have 2 meals? So there's some winners and losers in this whole history, and you can see it on the streets of Saigon, but the youth are on a completely different course, and so the energy and enthusiasm of the new generation is what the future will be, and you can see there's a whole new family growing up, often within the traditional structure, but now the women are working, and it is a new country and a new population. And I do recommend going out at night. Like in Bangkok, the day can be somewhat oppressive, but I recommend going out and seeing things like this on the Saigon River, which we may be near where we are, a fish restaurant in the belly of a whale. And so there's a lot of glittery new culture in Saigon, which makes it, for better or for worse, similar to many other modern cities, but still the underlying tradition of the society is there and to be appreciated. And the Vietnamese are particularly cheerful, and often they will smile even when they're saying yes to you, meaning no. And you cannot judge people necessarily by their facial expression, but this city is still a great pleasure to visit, though Ho Chi Minh never made it himself. He died in 1968 before the war was over, and now he's so venerated, they named the city after him, but almost none of the residents call it that. It's only the official name. And we are more typically greeted by these kind of young ladies who are the charm of Vietnam. And with that, I'm going to leave you with the Tet New Year greeting in Vietnamese, which is An Khang Trinh Vong, which is safety, health, and prosperity for this new year. And I look forward to seeing you ashore in Saigon. Thank you very much.